When I talk to you, my words aren't going, across the air into your ear and straight into your brain. That's just not how it works, right? When I speak, your whole nervous system is triggered. You're listening to the words. You're listening to yourself assemble those words and like create meaning of them, and then you process that, and then you respond, right? So I try to work with people to speak to people's listening, and when people just talk as if, well, you're going to understand what I say, and if you don't, you need to figure it out. It's like, no.
Before we forget, can you put a thing on the calendar or something real quick we got to repair that HDMI cable or replace it?
Yeah, that goes back to what you and I talked about.
Yeah.
To do it now.
You got to do it right now. Yeah. If you don't do it now, you forget.
This is true.
Yes. So
now, so you made a request of him. That's part of what I talk about in Syntactions is like you made a request.
Yeah.
All right. Was there enough information in that request for him to do it exactly like you wanted to do it?
Yes. I believe so. You can tell me no, but
well, part of the effective request is understanding the person that you're making the request of. There's background and context, so you make the assumption around. So if every time you all buy an HDMI cable, it's always this grade, this brand, this length, then you can probably trust he's going to do it. But if you leave those out, he might buy a 12-foot HDMI cable, and you meant that you wanted a 24-foot HDMI cable, and you were not satisfied because he didn't deliver on the conditions of satisfaction, although your request wasn't complete.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the kind of thing, and it's the sort of thing I like talking about, where one of the reasons there's so much waste, rework, failure in projects is that people aren't complete with their requests, but they don't think about it. We just do it. It's like, hey, could you bring me a coffee on Friday morning? Yeah, and I'm waiting at 7:30 for my coffee, and you show up at 10. It's like, man, I thought you were going to be here at 7:30 with my coffee.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
One of the things that we do have in our culture is we stop in meetings and we put things in the calendar right away.
That's what you were telling me about that.
And for example, like that request, I guess it went without, let's ask Josh, actually. Do you have a mic over there, Josh?
I don't.
Okay. Now, when you made that, let's talk about it. Let's give
him this is like a little exercise.
Yeah. When you were going to do that, were you going to set the meeting to talk to me about it, or were you going to set the meeting to actually go make the purchase?
I think I would have set the meeting to make the purchase.
Yeah.
So.
But I could have. You could have said, "Hey, Josh, could you order an ABC brand HDMI cable, the model that we usually get, but I want it in 24 feet. And I need it by Saturday morning at 8:00. Would you be able to do that, Josh?" Yeah, I commit. I'll have that done. Great, we're done. And we didn't set up a meeting to talk about it, but I made a request. I think everything was there. And the conditions of satisfaction are: I wanted this brand. What's the top popular brand?
I don't even know.
Now. Yeah,
there's a lot
Monster.
of them now.
Yes. And that might not be high quality now, but I need. It's like, you guys know Monster. You said 24-foot Saturday morning, 8 a.m. You're both in Central Time, so you have enough information, and then it's just done.
Yes.
And then if he doesn't deliver, then we've got an issue with reliability, which you're going to have to talk about, because trustworthiness requires reliability. Yeah, so all this stuff it's just pretty. It's like, and the thing I was mentioning earlier, it's like, what are the things we can learn from computers, right? Because we're always talking about what computers learn from us, but it's like, what are the things we can learn from computers? I mean, and it's really, what can we learn from how we've designed and implemented computers? And you start thinking about that. There's a lot of things, actually.
It was a lot of growth and self-development for me in my first serious relationship, which was with my wife, right? Mm-hmm. I would sit there and write code all day, and then I'd go interact with her, and she does not have debug log outputs. And if I tell her something once, she doesn't continue to loop that until infinity.
Right.
And so I just had to make these conscious mind shifts that, okay, I'm done talking to computers. Now I'm going to talk to humans.
Yeah.
That was hard for me.
Right. And the thing about talking to computer, are we on?
Yeah, we're recording.
Okay. I mean, around last time we just started, right?
Yeah.
And you use some of that, right?
All of it, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I love it. So the thing about computers, I mean, I started out as a software engineer, and my first programming job, I was assembler, which was totally cool. And assembler, any high level language, I'm not up to speed on all the current high level languages because it's been a while. But one thing I knew is that every language came with syntax, and there were only so many commands, only the language was finite. And if you didn't type in the language as intended, number one, it may not compile. And so number two, if it compiled, it doesn't mean it was going to be correct. And in order to get computers to do what we want them to do, we have to construct language that is our intentions and the computer will accept it, right? And then, if we have bugs, it doesn't know what to do. Well, think about how people communicate with each other. We have language, and everything we do is in language. We invent, we declare, we generate everything. And in fact, language is action. You make things happen. If you delegate, that's a request, that's action, and you get things done through language. But if we're not complete and accurate and clear and concise with our language, we may not get what we intended, right? And when people don't respond as we want, we can have problems in terms of not getting what we want. We have trust relationships, we have reliability, and we have rework and waste. And so I've just been thinking a lot about that in terms of what I do in my leadership practice.
So let's go deeper with the Josh example. So him and I have been working together for a while, and when it comes to equipment, he is the guy, right? So I defer to him on all things audio, and you tell me is the conversation we have all the time, right? Yeah. And so we've got this sort of working relationship, and then you bring in this new idea of hyper clarity or very specific, explicit instructions and how you're communicating. How do you then change that relationship? Like, is it as easy as I just start doing that as the leader now? That's just something that I put on me to learn and to hold myself accountable to do? Or how does that actually happen when you go and you coach people that aren't doing this and then they start doing this with their team?
Yeah, fair enough. And I've done this in organizations for years. In fact, I used to do this as a leader. And then when I started my leadership development program, it's just, I've been doing this for years. And so I know that it works. First of all, you pull the team together, and you have to be prepared for what the new rules of engagement are. So you make sure you're prepared to answer questions and specify it. But you pull your team together and say, look, I've been thinking about something, and I'd like to change the way we work. And I want to run this by you. I want to make sure that we all own it, that we understand it. And so I want to explain some things to you. And here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'd like to do. As we work together, there's 5 or 6 sort of language constructs that we can use. First of all, I can declare. And if I say, hey, I want to make a declaration. Starting next week, we are going to start looking at a different testing product, or we are going to start writing these back-end services. I make some form of declaration. If you think about it, the Declaration of Independence was a declaration. So you could make a declaration to your family, we're going to move to Tennessee, and look, you created a reality, right? So you say, so here's how declarations are going to work. And you have to have the authority to make declarations, but here's how declarations are going to work. And then here's our requests. Here's what a request is. Here's what the construct is. And there's other language constructs. I won't go into all of them. And we can go deeper if you'd like. But get everybody talking about it, understanding it, and then everybody making a commitment to do it. And then there's a certain amount of grace to say, oh, I made a mistake. Yeah, I know, I'm learning this. Learning, it takes time and practice and iteration. But over time, as the group commits to it, that's the first thing you want is a commitment to it. They commit to it, they start working through it, and it is so cool because it increases engagement, it increases trust, it increases reliability, and actually it can be kind of fun. Like, hey, you made a commitment, and people can start to have fun with it. But you got to get people together, have the conversation, and then get a commitment to it.
Have you written a book on this? These different?
I've been wanting to, yeah, and it comes from. I was thinking, in fact, in preparation for this call, I was thinking about, gosh, how do I language this and practice this? And I was talking to Josh about it. And like the day before, I was talking to my fiance. It was like syntactions, because I was thinking syntax, for computers, and then syntactions. And I mainly work with IT leaders. I can work with any leaders. But so I was thinking about that. And I think I have all of the material to write a book on it. I just need to pull the trigger. Maybe I'll do a project where I delegate it.
There you go.
And just pay for it, yeah.
That's how I did my book, is I hired somebody and I met with them 1 hour a week for several months, and then a book came out.
I needed to do that, yeah.
Because I'm really good at being present and answering questions and talking things out, But if you give me work that I have to go do in private alone, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
My first thing is to grab someone who can help. I don't know why I'm built like that, but I am.
Yeah. That reminds me, it's so helpful to understand how we're built. I'm in a coaching program. I'm always in a coaching program. I'm always learning and paying people to help me. And I'm in a program now, and we just did there's all these assessments and tests you can take, Myers-Briggs and DISC. And so I just did one called Motivational Maps, and it is so cool. And what it is you find out what your motivators are. And when you do the work that motivates you, it gives you energy. And then I think there's 8 categories. I haven't memorized them all. But the ones that are the lower score, that's where you get help. Because if you do that work, it's going to drain you. And so it's super helpful in building an organization. I'd like to actually get certified in it, because it's such a great tool. But I appreciate what you said about writing the book, because I think that's probably the way that I'm going to need to go. Now, these syntaxons, it's all based upon some prior work, right? Like we all build on each other's prior work, and so it's built upon some of the work that Fernando Flores did, and he called it Speech Acts, which is based upon some work that John Austin and John Searle, and who knows what they built it on. But it's all around language and linguistics and how we talk, and that we do as humans, fish swim, people talk.
I had to learn how to talk differently. Like I said, when I was at computers, you'd be very assertive and you would just declare what you would want. You'd be very specific and efficient with how you want that.
Yeah.
But with humans and our emotions, that can be taken as like you're a dick, right? So you kind of...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know what the professional term is for, but that's what everybody understands. Yeah. So understanding, I got some feedback after my first year or two of running this business, and about how I had made certain people feel. And part of me is because I do have a stronger personality. My initial reaction was get over it, become stronger.
Yeah.
But I realize it's a somewhat of a meet me in the middle thing. Like, yeah, they could be stronger, but I could also realize that they're not there yet. And maybe I kind of give them a little help along that journey, and I'm not so sharp. And so I really learned how to be aware of that. And I guess the way I would describe it was, I was a little flippant, I guess is the word. After I heard like 3 people in my life tell me that, I was like, okay, maybe I need to go Google what this word means, because I would just react quickly and react fast. And that had worked well for me to a certain point of maturity, but then it stopped serving me as well. And then I had to change.
Yeah. Well, with some people, that will still serve you well. And I think what I've learned over the years, and part of it's just having taken so many, assessments, DISC and, Myers-Briggs and all the other ones, is it's true people can come along to be more like you, but it's also true that people are who they are. A lot of psychologists and psychiatrists have put people into categories for a reason. There's some people that are very just assertive and dominant, type A, and there's some other that are sort of like quiet and but they're analytical, and some are like caring and supportive. And I think understanding the type of person that you're working with, letting them be who they are, having expectations and holding them accountable, and making sure they're in a space where they can be strong. And I think that's what a lot of about empathy is understanding, okay, like if I know that you're driven in type A and all of a sudden you're slacking off, you're not really doing your job, and something's up. Like, hey, Joe, this isn't like you. Joel, this isn't like you. Is everything okay? And we can have a conversation around that. But for me, care, that care has always been that sort of soft word, like we care for each other. But to me, all humans require care. And my number one thing is, whoever I'm working with, how can I approach them with care and empathy, which means I'm thinking about their concerns as if they're my own, right? Because so often it's about us.
Yeah, and one other thing I noticed too was, well, obviously I was very new. So previously, I was co-founders. I was a co-founder. Yeah. I was the technical person. I could build the product. I could build the teams. I knew engineers. That was all really great. But this is the first time, these past 6-7 years is the first time that I was the only one. So I had to learn the sales side of things, the people side of things that weren't engineers. I knew how to communicate pretty well with them. And at first, one of the mistakes made was I had people that I didn't trust. And it was definitely because I was hiring the cheapest people I possibly could, and they just didn't have the skills. So rightfully, I didn't trust them. And then I ended up doing a bunch of work, and it was just a huge mess. I slowly found that if I get high quality people that can execute in the given area that I need them to execute in, my life becomes beautiful.
Right.
And then I just have to care about them. And that's one thing I found that you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I find you can't train that. You just you can't train people to care. You have to find people who do care and then empower them.
Yeah. I think, I've had people who seem to have no empathy, and I've worked with them on care. And deep down, people do care, but it's like, what do they care about? And I think some people can develop empathy. I think others, they try to change their behavior, but that's not caring. It's just you're acting like you care. You know what I mean? You touched on trusting people, and I think that's how do you define trust?
That I don't have a good.
Without using the word trust.
Yeah, without using the word trust. I believe. I'll try to make this up on the spot.
That's okay.
I guess when Josh, I trust him for audio. So it's like, why do I trust him?
Yeah. Why do you trust Josh?
I don't think there was a very specific moment in time that I trusted him. When I brought him on the team, I had gone through the interviews with him. I had my other audio engineers interview with him. They said he's got the core skill set that we need. And then it was just a time thing. Over time, he delivered. I found that if I left Josh alone, that he would do good things without me having to push him to do good things. One specific example is we often over-record the show, and then he chops it down. And at first, I used to be really worried about which parts he would keep in, and wanting to make sure we got the main thing to be the main thing. And I had sort of forgotten about it for 4 or 5 months. And then I went back and I was doing a review with Andrea, one of our marketing people. And I said, oh, look, all the episodes are, this length. That's what I had asked for. And it was something that was beautiful because I had basically mentioned it once and he just kept it as a constant, very computer-like. And he kept that up. So that was a big +1 credit on the trust ledger that we have.
Yeah. And that we do so much just automatically. We wake up in the morning and we get out of bed and we get a cup of coffee and we don't, we're just not even thinking, right? Our subconscious is doing it and our mind's thinking about the day. And we don't often think about the words that we use. And, what in my work, what I do is sometimes people think I'm too picky about words, but words have meaning, and if words bring life into existence, then words are important. And so trust is a big one, right? And I most people I say, tell me what you think trust is. And I think people meant, it's like, well, how do I experience it? How do I feel it? But as you work with Josh, you think about that a second. When Josh says something, do you assess that he's sincere?
Not consciously.
And sincerity, it's hard to measure sincerity. It's like sincerity is if when somebody says something, it's consistent with what they're their private conversations, because we're always talking to ourselves, right? So when Josh says something, do you think, well, he's thinking that, I'm sure he's thinking the same thing that he's saying.
Oh, I believe Josh is in sync with his words and his thoughts.
You don't think about it, right? But that's part of trust, is somebody is sincere. And then the other one is probably why you hired him. Is he competent?
Yes.
Right. So if you hire somebody that's not competent, you're going to jeopardize the trust, right? It's like you want to trust people, but you just hired somebody that's incompetent. So you're going to have a problem. And people will do that. I think so-and-so will do a great job, but they're not competent. You can give them time to become competent, but that's going to impact trust. The other one is when Josh says he's going to do something, does he do it when he says he's going to do it, how you expect it to be done?
Yes.
So he's reliable.
Yep.
So those are the big. There's other ones, but those are the big components: is sincerity, competence, and reliability. And when we're working with people, we can actually make assessments when we select people. Are they trustworthy? And when we interview them, when we ask questions, we can then make an assessment of, do I think this person's trustworthy or not? So it's interesting when you start getting into it.
How do you do that in such a short time of knowing somebody, the trustworthy exercise?
Yeah, I think several ways. One, behavioral interviewing is always good, because it puts somebody on the spot to like, okay, this is how I handled this in the past. And interviewing is always interesting because you ask somebody a behavioral interview question and they might say, well, when you do this sort of thing, what you should do is like, no, I asked you, when in your situation, tell me about a time when you did this. And that's why behavioral interviewing is so important, is because they're explaining how they did something. Were they competent to do it? Were they reliable? Sincerity is a hard one. Whether that you kind of have to pick up on. And then I think making reference calls, and that's always a challenge because, sometimes those are prepared and planned and that sort of thing. But if you ask the right questions and you just kind of like a podcast, you forget that the camera's rolling and the microphone's on after a while. Same thing can happen when you're doing reference calls. They sort of like, you just get in the conversation, they forget.
Yeah, I only have one skill with the reference calls that I picked up by accident. I noticed that when I started doing them, so I started doing them based off a recommendation of somebody else that I looked up to, and I said, okay, I'm going to start doing those. And I would ask somebody, okay, I need 2 people that could speak to your character, your work ethic that you've worked with or around. They would give me these 2 people, and I would call and I would ask them a couple questions, and then one of them would be, if this person could work on anything and improve anything, what would it be? And then they always go to that. Their strength is their, weakness is their strength, and all that. They're great. But one time I found out that I had accidentally said something along the lines of, I'm always working on this. I was working on something at the time. So I said that to the person. I was like, I'm working on this currently. That's what I'm trying to do. What is the one thing this person could work on? And when, for some reason, I don't know why, I haven't questioned it or looked deep into it, but when I offer up the example of what I'm working on and what I'm improving on, and then I ask them versus just straight up asking them, they'll give me the real thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It drops the guard. It makes it, I think it makes it safe. Because people want safety, they want to be assured that it's safe. I think that's a lot of it. On the interviewing topic, I know a lot of your listeners everybody's interviewing, right? One of the things I learned that might be helpful, and some people do not like this, but I learned this during one of my interviews years ago. And there's a firm out there called GH Smart, and they have a whole practice around this. And there's really 2 questions. And a statement. One is, actually 3 questions. One is, what's the name of your boss? And like if you had a boss, you'd say
the market.
Yeah. Well, my boss is Susan. Oh, okay. Susan. What's Susan's last name? Smith. Oh, okay. Susan Smith. Yeah, I've heard of her. I think I might know her. And I'm sincere if I do or I don't. Right. All right. So if I was to call Susan this afternoon, and I said, hey, what are Joel's top 3 strengths and accomplishments? What would she tell me? And then you'd tell me, and I said, okay, now, let's say I call Susan this afternoon, and I ask her what 3 opportunities for improvement are. What are they? I almost always get what I believe to be sincere answers. Where normally if you'd ask somebody, what do you think your top 3 strengths and weaknesses are? They're going to be like, and these are famous interview questions, right?
The stump speech they have. Yeah.
But when you set it up with what's your boss's name? And if I was to, it creates like this psychological context that, well, Joel really could call my boss this afternoon. And some people don't like it, but to me, it's like, look, I need answers on this.
People have been resistant to it?
No, people always answer the question.
But they don't like it?
But when I explain it to other people, like if I'm mentoring somebody and I explain this method of interviewing, they're like, ooh, I'm not sure I can do that.
Well, I'm in support of it because that's how humans work. For example, if I said, pretend you're Bill Gates right now, you can do that without, there's all humans that, relatively speaking, 80% of humans can do that. You can just imagine you're someone else as a character. And so if you're jumping into that character of their boss, they're going to actually answer you through the eyes of what their boss would say. I don't think that that's a weird thing at all. I think that's very good. Yeah.
Well, it's again, for those listening, it works very effectively.
Yes.
And we should all be okay as interviewees answering those questions.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like, no, I got things I'm working on. I got strengths, and, I want to be as transparent as possible because you're making assessments of trust in advance, right?
And it's way easier to live your life just being transparent and open. It's way harder if you're trying to keep checks and balances of who you told what to or what you've exaggerated. And it takes a lot of introspection to figure out who you are, what drives you.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so much cost in the whole recruiting and hiring process. And don't be that person that, is playing the game and creating costs on everybody. Right. Yeah. So interesting.
So what are you seeing right now? You coach several different people. Are you seeing any trends across all the people you're coaching?
One of the things, let's talk about my audience, my clientele, if you will. I typically seek to work with people that are at the C-suite -1. So let's call C-suite N, N-1, maybe N-2, and I've got a program for new managers, emerging managers, and I've got a program for, director level. Many of the problem, and I think the pandemic made this worse, and that's around relationship development, visibility, building an identity, building eminence, and that's the thing that's hardest. And a lot of what's required, especially if let's say you're a director of IT, it's really important that you're known. It's really important that your accomplishments are known, your contributions are known. It's important that you make offers of value and help to the organization. And if you don't have relationships with people throughout the organization, the CMO, the COO, the CFO, or one level down, it's going to be hard to be successful. And a lot of highly technical people, they struggle with that. I like to say, your functional skills, your technical skills get you hired. And at some level, it's the relationship skills, the communication skills, the emotional management, mood management skills, and more that help you get promoted. And in fact, I think of a lot of people that have been let go, a lot of times it's those softer, we call them soft skills. And there was a day when I was looking around, this was like right after Y2K, and I noticed senior people leaving the company or getting demoted or marginalized. I'm like, what's going on? And I think at that point I started to think it's got to be the soft skills, but what are soft skills? And so I started paying for coaching and paid for a teacher and started, okay, communication, relationships, emotional management, empathy, these things are really important. But I think as I look around, the biggest blockers for people are relationship, communication. We should go deeper into communication, but communication and then emotional and mood management.
Can you give me more detail or color around the specific communication things that are blocking them?
Yeah, with communication, number one, and I think we're all familiar with this, is speaking the language of the person that you're talking to. And some people are good at that. Some people struggle with it, but it's that translation, especially in a highly technical role. If you're dealing with AI or security or cloud computing and you start throwing jargon out, they're gonna shut down right away. And so speaking, one of the things I talk to my clients about is understanding the person that you're speaking to. And this is one of the reasons we want to get out and develop relationships. If you're the CEO, one of the reasons I want to spend time talking to you, asking you questions and getting to know you is that it's not just for visibility, but so when I talk to you, I'm speaking to your background listening. When I talk to you, my words aren't going, across the air into your ear and straight into your brain. That's just not how it works, right? When I speak, your whole nervous system is triggered. You're listening to the words. You're listening to yourself assemble those words and create meaning of them, and then you process that, and then you respond, right? So I try to work with people to speak to people's listening, and when people just talk as if, well, you're going to understand what I say, and if you don't, you need to figure it out. It's like, no, I got to speak. And so that's why it's so common to use metaphors, create pictures, or maybe explain the meaning of something depending on how much time you're going to spend with a person. But that is a huge skill. And I often talk, a client will say, yeah, I had this presentation or had this conversation and my message didn't land well. as if there was this place in the body where it was going to land, and it, it was up to them to like take it off the landing pad and process it. It's like, no, the reason it didn't land well is that you didn't speak to their background listening in a way that was meaningful and understandable, and they could act with it and work with it. So
that's what popped into my head just now is a pro tip when giving talks in public. So I have found that you've got, let's say you're at a conference and you're giving a talk and you've got this audience, they read the title and the description of the talk. Well, I used to, my first several talks, I'd just go up there, give my talk, and be good to go. And then I noticed that there was, not as much engagement. Another speaker had told me, hey, talk to some of the people as they're coming in and asking them what they are expecting out of the talk. Because everybody sees that and they have a different understanding of it. And then I started doing that, and I just basically, I had my base talk, but I just twisted it and shaped it to whatever the 4 or 5 people who I talked to. And then I also had my people picked out, that.
Right. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I watched a Simon Sinek course on presenting, and that was one of the things he talked about was, because I think he's a great speaker. One of the things he talked about was, picking people and actually, talking to people. It's funny you mentioned that. One of the things I would do, and I still do if I'm going to do a talk, is I don't want to go from, my hotel room or the hallway straight on stage and talk. And I call it priming the pump. So one of the reasons I talk, if I can talk to people in the audience, is just to get talking, just to get going and to like empathize with them. And but what you said is great. I think that's a great idea for everybody.
If I can't do that for whatever the reason of the event structure or whatnot, the way I prime the pump for myself is I'll sit backstage. I put on music in my AirPods, turn it all the way up, and then I take a notepad that I have, and so I'll have essentially like a set list of the 4 or 5 topics on one side, and then on the pages behind that, I'll just sit there and just start writing, this is going to be the best talk of your life. The audience is going to love you. Just like keep going on and on and on with all of these positive things until the moment that somebody comes and picks me up, because if I don't do that, my thoughts will creep in on me and it'll pull my energy level down. And I won't be able to come out there and be the person that I need to be to deliver that talk.
I like that. It's like affirmations, positive affirmations, and keeping yourself focused on the energy of that. That's really good. I think it was James Altucher. I haven't listened to him in a while, but one time, he says he does stand-up comedy. It's like a hobby of his. And I think it was him that was saying that the day of his presentation, he would listen to stand-up comedy. And so I started doing that because it gets you into more of a playful, and because the fact is when we present, we need to be entertaining, right? Yeah. I mean, people want information, but they don't want to go to sleep, or they don't want to think, well, Joel seems nervous. That makes me uncomfortable.
It does. Yeah.
So
I picked that up several years ago. I was raising capital, and I forget her name, but this awesome girl was assigned to me. She was with the fund to take me around and meet me at these different places where I'd pitch. And the first couple times, or the very first time I was going to go up and pitch, she was standing behind me and she just started saying all this stuff in my ear. And I was like, what is happening right now? This makes me feel so good.
Yeah.
And then that happened like 2 or 3 more times. And then the first time she couldn't make it, I was like, oh no. What do I do? I'll just write down all the stuff she was saying to me.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so that's how I came across that tactic.
That's good. That's a great tip.
Yeah.
That's good.
To your point about listening, one thing that I have done, I've seen some other people do it, but mostly learned it from myself. I was early on in my career, I was building some software that helped take a manual process of working with autistic kids and the skills that they would need to work on, and then that would process, they would get government funding through it. Just took paper and just made it digital, nothing special. But it forced me to read all of these assessments that they use with these autistic kids. I had one of them that I checked yes to, and then I was like, well, okay, now I'm going to research this. So what I noticed that I do, and I actively always am trying to work on it to this day, is when I want to listen and I really, really care, here's the conflict. I would turn my ear towards them, towards the person. So I'd turn my ear towards them. And in their perspective, the way it looks to them, if I'm looking down and to the left and they're trying to look at me and I'm showing them my ear, it looks like I'm looking away and I'm not interested in what they're saying. But it's exactly the opposite. There's so much stuff going on around me that I need to just completely narrow and focus in on that. And when I learned how I was perceived in that way, I then started noticing that I picked it up from my dad. Because after I started seeing him, after I learned that, I was like, oh, my dad does this. I probably picked it up from him as well. And so it's just been this ongoing thing I've tried to reduce myself doing. But I think that's important because I do see a lot of really intelligent people that do that. And I don't think that they understand. They're thinking from their angle that they're being incredibly respectful and putting all of their attention on you.
But so let me ask you a question. This would be something that we do in coaching, right? So do you still think you listen better when you do that?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you want to be the best listener possible. So what would be a way that you could speak something to the other person to create a context that it would be okay for you to do that?
I would just tell them. I'd say, hey, I noticed that I focus best. I'll turn my ear towards you. It's not that I'm not listening. I just want you to know that.
Yeah. Yeah. And what does that signal to them?
I don't know.
That you care. It's sort of like we do this right now since we all went remote, and sometimes I'll have, if I've got 3 monitors, and if I have one over here and I've got some notes about them that I want to, this is important to our conversation, I'll say, hey, Joel, if I look over here, it's because I've got some notes that are going to be important for a conversation. So I am present with you and I'm working with you, because that's the thing, is we all want to know the other person's present with us. And so if you were to say, hey, just so you know, something about me is, the way my body works is if I turn my ear, it's going to help me listen better. So that's why I'm doing that. And if you did that to me, I'd be, oh, cool. That's different. I like that. You're very self-aware. So that could be a very healthy thing.
Podcasting is a great medium for me because when everyone's remote, I'm in ears. And sometimes Josh has been pushing me to go over the ear in person. I haven't gotten there. Right. Have you done that a lot on podcasts? You do over the ear stuff while you're in person?
I don't.
I haven't.
Yeah, I don't. I've thought about it for sure. I just like things more what I consider to be natural.
Yeah.
I guess whatever is natural is whatever a person thinks is natural, but I just like it more natural. As long as the quality's there and I don't get any complaints, I tend to like it just, sort of be free with my computer. But what you talked about is one of the things that I work with in coaching is, it's kind of a funny, some people aren't familiar with this term, it's called ontological coaching. And it's like, ooh, what ontological, and I try not to even use the word, but it is so powerful because everything we do with our body. And we use language, we have emotions, and in fact, every memory we have stored there's an emotion that goes with it that's stored, and we have our bodies. And so one of the things we do with ontological coaching and ontological design is we begin with our body and our way of being. And there's a really cool model. It's called observer action results. And if you think about it, if we want results, we need actions, right? And so if somebody is not getting the result they want and they keep doing this same action over and over again and not getting a different result, what's that called?
Insanity,
right? Right. And so then, that's insanity. I'm not going to do that. So then what's the next thing we do? I got to change my actions. And so, then I keep doing that till I get the results I want. Well, what if you were to, we call it, take a step back and you're not getting the results you want, is go back to who you are as an observer. And most people don't really observe themselves. They just are. You wake up in the morning, you have a cup of coffee, right? We just are on autopilot. But what if you step back and say, okay, the observer that I am, how am I observing myself? How am I observing the situation? And you can shift yourself as an observer. So you can shift your body, you can shift your language, what are you saying to yourself? You can shift your emotions, go listen to some music or something. Shift yourself an observer. You open up a whole new space of possibilities to design action, then to produce the results you want. And that's called second order learning. First order learning is if I just change my actions to get a different result. If I go back and change myself an observer, then I produce different actions, and I think of so many times where the results I've gotten are so much better because I took the time to go back to myself an observer.
So I'm going to give you an example. You can tell me if I'm picking up on it correctly. Yeah. A few years ago, I wanted to be healthier and I wanted to start running again. Mm-hmm. So I had read somewhere that would shift your identity to start saying, I am a runner, like even on day one, right? And then all of a sudden you keep saying that, and then you structure your life about what would a runner do? Well, they would be involved with, I don't know, following running things on Instagram, and they would go spend extra money on shoes that they wouldn't probably normally spend for the best running shoes. And they would probably buy running clothes, and then they would probably wake up and go running, and then slowly just thinking, I would just wake up every day and say, I'm a runner. And then I look back and I'm like, oh, I've been, doing 3 to 5 miles every day for 2 years. And I just kind of became a runner from not being a runner.
It's a great example. And this is really good because whether it's, diet or exercise or picking up an instrument, people, they want these results and they say, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm starting tomorrow. I'm going to start running, right? What you did was second order learning or looking at yourself as an observer. And what did you say? What,
I'm a runner.
That's a declaration.
Yeah.
You made a declaration that I'm a runner. And then, so that's the language part of our way of being. And then how did that affect your emotion or your mood?
Well, I felt good about it on the short term, obviously, because the new declaration can feel good in the moment. But the real test came, I think, the next morning when I woke up and I said, oh, that yesterday Joel is doing that whole running thing. Am I gonna do that? And then I said, yeah, I'm choosing my identity to be a runner. And then I just said, all I have to do is not worry about 3 years or 4 years. I just have to wake up today and choose it today. Yeah. And then I just did it for years.
Yeah. So you were exactly doing that. The way of being and looking at your way of being and it's an interesting intersection. It's actually a Venn diagram when you think of body, language, and emotions. And emotions and moods go together. They're different. But emotions, some people would say emotion stands for energy and motion. And there are certain emotions like sadness or grief that shut down possibilities for thinking and acting. If you wake up and you're really sad about something, it's hard to get out of bed, and there's language that goes along with that. Oh, I'm so sad today. I lost a pet or whatever it might be. And that's part of being human. But the emotion and the language go together and then they impact your body. And so I can say things to myself like affirmations that trigger my emotion and shift my mood. Right. And then from there, that'll shift my body. So if I'm backstage and I'm like, just not, not so sure about my talk, maybe I didn't prepare enough, I'm a little nervous or whatever, I'm a great speaker, I can do this, I'm prepared, people want to listen to me. All of a sudden my emotions getting good, my body's I'm breathing better, and the whole thing just starts to come together in a way that you're just better positioned to do a presentation than if you sit backstage. Oh, I'm afraid they're not going to like me. I'm not really prepared. Whatever. That's going to affect body language, emotion as you go forward.
I used to think it was stupid. I would see the personal development stuff, and I was like, those people are crazy.
It's biological.
I was like, this is so stupid. And then I got frustrated enough, and I. At a point in my life, and I heard a guy named Jim Rohn say, for things to change, you've got to change, or the most frustrating thing in the world is expecting above average results without being an above average person. And so I said, okay, well, maybe this self-development area has some legitimacy towards it. And I actually got to the end of my rope and I said, well, I've tried everything and nothing works. And then I heard someone say, did you really try everything?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, no, there's a couple areas that I actively avoid because I know that they're stupid. And I was like, well, you know what? Life is long. I've done plenty of stupid things. Let's just go hang out in the areas I've been dismissing this whole time and see if there's anything there. Yeah. And there was. It was the whole personal. I've got on my phone every other day. I'm pretty consistent about it. It's David McGraw, like some power affirmations. It's just like a 12-minute midday break thing where he just says a bunch of different things. And if in the morning I wake up and I'm a little bit not wanting to get out of bed type deal, I'll put those on. If I'm after lunch or if I'm having kind of a rough day and I notice I'm tense, I'll go listen to that. Yeah. And because he's saying the things of like who I want to be. Right. You know?
Oh, I'm a big believer in it. Yeah, and that language triggers your emotion and your mood, and it affects your body and everything, yeah.
What are people experiencing when they reach out to you?
When we work together?
Yeah. Like why? Like what's happening in my life that I'm like, I need to go work with Bill?
Yeah. Most people that reach out to me are feeling stuck. They've been trying to get promoted. It's usually they've been trying to get promoted, they've been trying to make more money, or they've been trying to get a job, and nothing seems to be working. And they'll look at my background and like, well, he seems to, especially in technology, he seems like he was able to become a vice president and a CIO, a CTO. And so I'm, sort of like I've tried everything, and so that's often when people reach out to me. CIOs, senior leaders, CTOs will reach out to me if they have a team and they're not getting the results they want. The team's not working well together. There's a leadership gap. There's a lot of people are retiring, and there's just a need for leadership development. A lot of companies now they're not investing as much in leadership development. They're going outside.
I know.
And so, like I said earlier, when I work with people experience a transformation. Every client that I've worked with has experienced, some form of transformation, and oftentimes it's personal, not just professional. They're healthier. They're becoming better spouses or partners. They're keeping their commitments. They're becoming reliable. They're becoming trustworthy. They're becoming competent. Like they're starting to value learning and becoming competent because of the importance of that. So those are just some of the things.
When we had the leadership training business as our core business, the thing that I found very interesting that I wasn't expecting is that most people wanted to pay for it personally. They did not want their company to pay for it. Yeah, because they wanted to improve themselves and grow themselves, and they didn't want to go to their company and have to ask for it. And my job is not to tell the market to change. It's just to pay attention to what's happening in the market. And I like how I see the market too, which is highly qualified, experienced people with a group of clients. And then you just really dive into them and work with them directly.
Yeah. Some of my best clients are the ones that pay because they came out of it. And I spent over $100,000 on coaching over the last 20 years. And I've got a multiple return on the investment, over the course of my career. And so, I firmly believe that, and if I go into a corporation, which I have corporate programs too, and people are told they're going to go do it, you get about 30% of the people that are like, oh, I can't wait. 30% of the people that, I'm going to do the work. This is going to be good. And 30% like, oh, I don't know if I have time for this. And, but when they all come out of it, they're all, like I had one program, I had 12 people and companies going global, and 4 of the 12 took the top 4 spots in the global reorg. And so, we're getting the outcomes that we're after.
When people come to you, I know this is going to be highly specific to the person, but in general, maybe people out there that are looking for a job, they're making that transition. And you said you've coached some people who are in that spot and they get frustrated and they come reach out to you. What do you look at first?
People that are looking for a job?
Yeah.
The first thing I always look at is, are they open, teachable, and do they have an ambition? And there's this concept that I learned from my coach from years ago, which is there's plus self, minus self, zero self. Plus self is somebody that they think they know it all. They don't think they have much to learn. Zero is when it suits them, and minus self are like, I need help. I know I need help, and I don't know it all. And so I won't take clients if I have an assessment they're a plus self. And zero is like, but it's usually people that they know they need help, they want help, they're hungry, they're willing to do the work. People that come to me in that job search and branding and all, because I have a personal branding and job search program. It's not easy. And you might know that one of the hardest things to do, and I've done this several times in my life, one of the hardest things to do is go through that process of who am I, what do I want, what's my brand, and I make people go from a bunch of bullets down to a elevator speech. What's your elevator speech? One sentence that describes your brand, and it's got to be punchy, right? And then they build all these like content assets, like digital assets, like all the narratives and stuff, and then you start putting that together in a resume or LinkedIn profile. It's like when people do marketing, And versus a lot of people, they go straight to the resume. It's like, okay, I need to update my resume. What are the bullets? It's like, no, it's sort of like writing software. That's the last thing you do. And it's not, it's not all the work. The hard part is doing all the analysis and all that design and upfront work.
Yeah. I see a lot of LinkedIn profiles and a lot of bios. It's on every prep sheet, the LinkedIn bio of the individual I'm talking to. So I've seen north of 600 of them. And there is definitely a difference in quality. There's a huge difference in quality when you see someone who's been intentional about, often when they get to the stage where they have a book, they typically will have like it really well organized. But there are people that don't have books that also are very clear about the problem they're trying to solve and who they help. And they're just, you nailed it. They market themselves well. So is that a service you offer, or is that mixed in with your coaching? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a service I offer. Yeah. I don't do as much of it these days just because I'm so busy with the other work. But I'm helping somebody. I actually have 2 clients right now. I'm helping with that. So, but yeah, I make sure they want to do the work because it's a lot of work. It also goes back to some people like to do different things. We talked earlier about some people like to do personal reflection and branding and really spend time on who they are and what they have to offer, what they've accomplished and how to craft that. Other people want to phone it in. And if you're one of the people that want to phone it in, get help. It's worth it. It's because, you think about what you're going to make in the future. And I always work when I'm working with people, it's like, you want that starting, if you're going for salary with a package, you want that to be as high as possible when you start, because you're at that you're setting the floor there, right? So you want to set that floor as high as possible.
Yeah, you never have to convince me to get as much money as as available.
Right,
yeah, that's like a default, Yeah, because you can't go. It's really hard to go up.
Yeah, it is.
It's way easier to have something high and then let them figure out where it's at. But yeah. All right. So, what is your website? What is your LinkedIn?
Yeah, people can find me at www.tingleleadership.com. And there's some information there, and you can set up a call with me if you want to talk. And then on my LinkedIn profile, I don't know if I remembered it, but Bill G. Tingle. I think it's Bill G. Tingle. You just search me, you'll find me, and people can DM me there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. This is great, man. Is there anything that we didn't cover that we want to get out there to the world? Bill is awesome. Go to Tingle Leadership.
Yeah. All of that. Yeah.
Well, we made a podcast. How do you feel?
Great.
Nice.